Let me tell you my story.
My skin is always like this. Let's talk about sex.
And put an end to fossil fuel exploitation
To prevent environmental catastrophe.
Okay, it's working, great. I'm Anastasia. Oh, wait. Oh, my God. I want to ask a question. How many of you here have gone to Russia? Please raise your hand. Oh, wow. That's a lot. My name is Anastasia, and I spent 13 years of my life there. Well, many think of Russia as an evil energy empire with Putin at the throne. For those who, well, when I was little, I went to a Gazprom primary school. For those of you who don't know what Gazprom is, it is a corporation that exports gas to Europe and doesn't let it freeze to death. Or at least that is what they think. My school was truly exceptional, and by all means better than most, principally because it was sponsored by Gazprom, and Gazprom has a lot of money. And so I went to a public school with a greenhouse and a private zoo of 50 animals. The curriculum was simply fabulous. Apart from standard subjects, we were taught intensive English, we were taught informatics, so computer skills, and of course, environmental science. When I was in third grade, my class won a Moscow City Sustainable Futures Fair, where we designed a model for a city that was built under a solar panel dome. That's not my picture. But it was powered by solar panels, and we could regulate the climate inside it. The city also had sustainable infrastructure and farms. I realized that the fair was perhaps the very thing that inspired me to develop interest in sustainability. Growing up, I always loved reading, and I could read anything I could get my hungry eyes on, especially sci-fi novels and scientific magazines. But I loved material things, and just reading about the future and spaceships and flying cars wasn't enough for me. I needed to experience it physically. And so when I was 11 years old, that is my original picture. When I was 11 years old, I designed a flying machine that would use vacuum as fuel. The vacuum would be artificially generated within the machine and then released into the atmosphere. Then the outside air would supposedly take up the empty space and push the machine in whichever direction I wanted. Unfortunately, the process never truly lifted off the ground because I didn't really have the resources at that age. Because of my rather active parents, I was a well-rounded child. My other interests were ballet, folk dance, painting, skiing, ice skating, drawing, and many other things I can't remember now. But when asked who I want to become when I grew up, I always said a spaceship captain, head of an international spy organization, or an astrobiologist. So I consider it ironic that I went to a gas company-sponsored school, where they greenwashed us students and essentially everyone who cared about the environment. Well, truly, the topic of ecology has never been the most popular subject in Russia. This tendency to ignore this issue dates back to the Soviet Union, where everything, including the environment, was sacrificed in the name of industrial and economic progress. And defeating America, of course, if we're going to be honest here. Well, living in Moscow, I was very often exposed to rather luxurious aspects of life because Moscow is one of the richest cities in the world and the capital of Russia. After the Soviet Union collapsed and the crisis of 1998 ended, everyone in Russia seemed to have received a second chance, and they grasped it however hard they could and started making money. So Moscow, during the time of my childhood, was a steaming pot filled with promising individuals and entrepreneurs. Everyone seemed to be racing for wealth and status, and it was really easy to get caught up in that game, especially for a little girl with enormous ambitions. As I grew older, my interests and my interest in space flights changed into more realistic and money-making careers such as business and law. But I can't blame myself for making that choice because I had a pretty enticing example before me, the oligarchy, people who had everything. State-owned conglomerates, along with oligarchs, have taken total control of Russia's energy resources, economy, and the government. But despite that seemingly eerie environment, the economy was thriving. People outside of Russia are often deceived by stereotypes. And to illustrate some of them, I created a collage and I spent 1 hour on it, so please admire it. So, living abroad, I've heard many fascinating and sometimes shocking things about my country. And one of them is the fact that every Russian living abroad must be a secret spy. But today, I want to talk about another thing, renewable energy in Russia. So long before Putin became president in the year 2000 and was still a skinny and young KGB officer, he had believed that, and I quote, restructuring of the national economy on the basis of mineral and raw material resources was a strategic factor to economic growth in the near future. And so, over the past 25 years that Russia existed as a state, the government has taken control of 78% of gas production and 53% of gas output. Oil output, sorry. It's graphs, yeah, math. But for some reason, renewable energy wasn't invited on this journey of progress and prosperity. And this is a huge issue, especially for the 21st century, and especially for the third largest CO2 emitter in the world that Russia is. The exploitation of fossils has had an extremely detrimental impact on nature, wildlife, and the quality of air and water in Russia, as well as the rest of the world. Russia is the 10th largest economy in the world, but when it comes to energy use, it is well behind everyone. Why? The power grid that currently distributes electricity to the most populated areas of Russia was developed in the 1960s of the last century and has not been modernized nor received any investment ever since. It is unfit to be connected to new clean energy sources due to many technical issues I'm not going to go into because there are so many. So, on top of being so evil already, Russia provides some of the largest fossil fuel subsidies in the world. They're concentrated mainly around natural gas and electricity. This is why energy in Russia is so cheap compared to the rest of the countries in the world. So subsidies artificially reduce prices, thus encouraging higher consumption and discouraging investment in new efficiency measures and renewable energy. Considering the myriad problems related to fossil fuels, a logical question arises. Why not use renewable energy and avoid the future we're currently heading into? The future of polluted skies, perished flora and fauna, and human degradation. I want a future where humans live in a paradise that they have created on our planet, working and growing together. I want to be able to travel to other star systems and make connections with civilizations as advanced as ours. But, given that Russia has an enormous fossil fuel energy lobby, it would be suicidal to try and eliminate the fossils from the economy at once. It is paramount to find an energy compromise, and this is what I have been trying to achieve over this past year. You will all be sitting here until tomorrow morning if I try to explain all the technicalities of my proposal for Russia to shift toward renewable energy. I would know since I am the one who wrote a 30-page report on this as part of my project. But I have selected the most important steps just for you. Step number 1, evaluate possible locations for new energy installments. and create a universal plan for the country that includes long-term vision and implications. The goal is to eliminate all conventional energy resources except for nuclear and hydro from the power grid, with an intention to create a more sustainable and self-serving environment. Step number 2. Tell Putin he was wrong about the economy, in his face. I hope I'm not going to be banned from Russia after this, but... So, as part of its economic strategy, Russia exports a lot of fossil fuels, regardless of the market conditions, and even when there is inflation, like now. Well, that's great for the buying states, of course, but not Russia, and of course not the Russian environment. So, in my paper, I advise Russia to continue selling its natural resources, however, but under stricter regulations. Specifically, sell less oil and not flood the international market with cheap product and compete with APEC or whatever. So, step number 3. Demolish the old dinosaur of a power grid and replace it with an innovative Star Trek-worthy energy system. It will unify Russia both physically and figuratively, bringing sustainable electricity and heat to the remotest places in Russia, such as Siberia, the Polar Circle, and the nation's southern region. Russian city infrastructure will face the same fate as the power grid. Conventional water heating power plants will be demolished, and instead, cities will be connected to the new power grid with infinite energy capacity. City structures that are no longer fit for function within the new system will also be destroyed. As a result, Russia might become one of the first countries in the world to massively integrate the concept of sustainable cities. So, the new sustainable energy mix will include in itself offshore and onshore wind, solar panels, hydroelectric, geothermal, and nuclear. So, in order for all of this to happen, a team of experts and planners must be established to oversee and evaluate the ongoing change. They will also be responsible for agitating the community to support renewables. So, having grown up in Russia, I understand the country from within. Russia is one of the largest producers and fossil fuels exporters in the world. Apart from being extremely unsustainable in that regard, Russia practices inefficient energy use. This inefficiency is caused by the old state of the power grid, enormous fossil fuels lobby, and subsequently, little interest and investment in sustainability. However, Russia's renewable energy potential is gigantic, and if we aim to avoid a total ecological catastrophe, a viable and realistic plan for its development must be developed as soon as possible. So this plan must suit both the government's needs and adhere to the international sustainability standards. So in an effort to explain Russia's energy situation in more depth, I wrote a 30-page evaluation of the country's energy grid and its future as a beacon of sustainability, potential future. I will download it on the internet later because I'm still making some edits, but you will be able to access it very soon. I want to see my homeland, and by homeland I mean both Russia and the Earth, become, if not a paradise, a much more sustainable and ecologically sound place than it is now. I want my children and grandchildren to be able to live the life I could only fantasize about as a kid, and continue to advance our civilization into a more progressive and sustainable future. So, a wise man once said that we shape our realities. I hereby invite you to gather our global forces and put an end to fossil fuel exploitation, human greed, and subsequently corporate domination, and make the world of Star Trek a reality. I want to change Russia and the world for the better, and I will. After all, Putin and I do have the same personality type. Thank you.